If you've ever felt like you're living a life that wasn't quite yours, carrying burdens you didn't choose, this conversation might be for you. I'm Barbie Wolf, and you're listening to Unboxing Barbie, a space for honest conversations about healing, faith, and becoming truly ourselves. Let's unpack this together. Welcome to Unboxing Barbie, Episode 1. This will be a two-part episode, starting off with an interview that I am super excited to bring you. Today, I am honored to welcome two incredible women who are making a real difference for trauma survivors everywhere. Raeva, a survivor herself and the visionary CEO, and Erin, PhD and Chief Product Officer, are the co-founders of Rebound, a groundbreaking research-based app designed to support healing and resilience after trauma. Together, they are transforming how survivors access care and community. I am so grateful to have them here to launch us into unboxing fear. I have to warn you, though, meeting Raeva for the first time in person had me snotting grateful tears upon introduction. So you're going to drop right into a conversation that hit the ground running. We're so delighted.
No, we are so happy to be here. We think about you and talk about you all the time, and what a positive force in the community.
And we're
sorry, we're not even started yet.
What the heck? Oh my gosh. Wow, that's the best kind of way to start. I'm not even kidding you.
I mean, even what you said about the Rebound social media content that Raeva puts together, you like that it's a bit raw and stuff. I feel like people love hearing it not too polished sometimes. So
yeah, and not ever with any one narrative to throw either. I don't feel like anybody from your team is ever trying to steer anyone a specific direction except to the truth and the validity of their own story. And here's the power of your app. In just my free trial, this all started because I had to sit through that first storytelling. Sorry, I'm getting into the nitty gritty of your app, but I can't tell you enough how helpful your content and your app are in making people feel absolutely okay with where they are right that second. There's no judgment, there's no shame, there's no fear. You can take this in whatever piece you can handle. I've got a lot of crazy experiences that play into how I view the world right now and how unokay I am with the way things have always been done, just because they've always been done that way. So I'm super thankful that you guys went through the hard work of getting that up together. This is all just personal aside stuff.
Oh, that means so much. That could not mean more to us. And I think, yeah, what you're describing is kind of the bane of my existence when people's reasoning for things is it's been done that way. Oh, really? We've nailed it? You think so?
Newsflash, how are we doing right now? Really? Yeah. I don't know. It just, even globally, we should be, not should be. I hate shooting on anybody. But as a species, I have a strong faith in a creator of a universe that we can or cannot get into. But I truly believe that our whole job is just to leave this place better than we found it in one form or another. Just leave your space, leave your community, leave your town, leave your home, give it whatever you can. But if it's one piece of trash on your way into the local library, pick it up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's look at the world that way. And I feel like if we could do that, less fear, right? More love. And that's why, I don't know, just fear has really held me back. Fear of people knowing my story. If you follow along, the fact that I'm even willing to have my face out there and people know what city I'm in is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak to that piece tremendously. I felt very much the same way of there's this kind of real fear that I had of identifying myself as a trauma survivor. Or what would that mean for how people saw me, or how would that shape my identity? It's not like I'm a public persona, but it definitely took a lot of thought and a lot of just pausing and being weighing my desire for privacy or keeping that stuff close with the reality of the situation, which was that I think my views on it were so wrapped up in shame or how things should be. But the fact is, when you're a trauma survivor not because of your own actions, but because of what other people have done to you.
Yep.
And I weighed that alongside my similarly like deep obsession with trying to move the needle in whatever little way I could, and was like, okay, if I start identifying like this, maybe it just decreases the shame, maybe even just slightly for one other person, or makes things seem just a little more universal, like a little, like makes someone feel a little less alone. And I also thought, like, as trauma survivors, it's so important for us. I think we have such deep skepticism about the world because our trust has been broken so profoundly that for me, I knew when I was doing work for trauma survivors, if I did not identify as a trauma survivor, I would never be able to break that trust barrier, because I know that as a trauma survivor myself, I would need the person I was talking to have some sort of understanding of where I was coming from. And so it was really that in order to do what I want to do with my life, I have to say the quiet part out loud, and have to put like any sort of shame or fear on the back burner. It doesn't mean it isn't still there, but it means that the other things that I care about just so far outweigh that. And I think what you're doing is really, really incredible. Having kind of done some of that, I know it's hard, and I just like, I could not applaud it more. I think your work is going to help so many people, and I think it already does.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Gosh, that's so rad. I really appreciate it. Okay, so will you tell me a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I've been in digital health my whole career. And many years ago, I kind of got the unexpected diagnosis that I had trauma. And it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere for me. I was really, really surprised. I was like, I didn't go to war. What is this? Am I going to have it forever? And then begun the journey of trying to find help. I had to talk to 22 different providers to finally find one with the training and availability to treat me, and then just spend way too much money out of pocket recovering. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to get care that was actually effective and was able to recover. But I realized that the vast majority of people never actually would. Trauma is so common, but we have such a shortage of access to affordable, effective care. We don't have enough therapists, and even of the ones that we do have, 65% of them aren't trained to treat trauma. And so it's incredibly hard for a lot of us to feel like recovery is even possible. A lot of us, again, start to think that the fault lies with us, that because we don't realize that effective care even exists because so few of us get it, we end up just thinking it's our own fault or we're fundamentally broken. And so I became obsessed with this problem and started digging through the academic literature, because I figured someone had to be solving this in some way, someone smarter than me, someone on the science side. And so I started digging through the literature, and that's when I found Erin's work.
Yeah. I mean, it was really great. Like, as Raeva was like connecting with me, it was like kind of that perfect timing, like meant to be kind of vibes. Like we were talking at a time when I was getting disillusioned with kind of like the traditional path I had been on. So I had been spending like my whole career, like, researching trauma and recovery, also like training clinicians in like evidence-based trauma interventions, and doing work like trying to get like trauma programs up and running in community health centers. So I was like hustling pretty hard to like try to get good stuff out there. And really feeling like, man, this is so hard, like working within the system. There's so many barriers, and there's only so much any one person can do. But the people who it's like really easy to connect with about it are like survivors themselves. And so, if you get straight to the source, like it is a different picture altogether. So like Raeva and I like obsessed with the same issues, but like we're working at it in different ways, and kind of came together and thought like, between us, like we've got what we need to like try doing this in a little bit of a different way. And so that's where, Rebound was really born with Raeva, but then like once I jumped in, we started like working together to really take it in the direction and like turn it into like what it is today. So it's been just like the the honor of my career to get to like do this work. And yeah, it's been incredible.
So then are you an author? What kind of literature was she finding? Tell me about that.
Like the nerdiest of all nerdy stuff, like journal, like peer-reviewed journal articles, like stuff that like is really cool if you're in academia, but like no normal person will ever see it. So,
except me. I probably read some of it now that I think about it. I'm like, wait a minute, I should probably look her up. That's so awesome. I really want to unbox fear because of the fact that, as I dig more and more into my own faith and my own patterns, I'm noticing that my shame is actually rooted in fear of being misinterpreted, hurt again, all of the things. And so I'm really digging into like how trauma and fear interplay constantly. So in your opinion, what's the fundamental relationship between trauma and fear? And how does this shape the stories that we tell about ourselves?
I mean, this is a huge one. And I think, even just from a scientific standpoint, even if the day-to-day experience isn't instantly identified as like a fear response, fear is by far like the most common experience, like underlying how we kind of hold and carry trauma throughout our lives. And it can like rear its head in so many different ways. So, I think about like, we talk about like having experienced trauma like as this one and done event, but it's really more than just this thing that happens to us. It's like this lasting fear imprint on our nervous system. So after something traumatic happens, like fear goes from being this like in the moment experience to being something more like a lens through which we experience the world around us.
Yes.
And so that can impact like our relationships, our memories, like our sense of who we are. And it really takes over like our own narrative. So the stories we tell ourselves about what has happened to us in our life, about what might happen in the future, about what's happening right now, like we're seeing this through this like fear lens. So and then we can get really down on ourselves, down on other people, like everything can just look a little bit less shiny and hopeful. And the reality is like you don't know it like when you're deep in it, but those fear stories, like that's us trying to like survive. It's not a reflection on like our actual reality. Once the event part of the trauma is done and we're like objectively safe, that fear might not be serving us anymore, but like try to tell your body that.
Yes.
So
yes.
the trauma is like really teaching our body to like stay safe by being fearful and like anticipating danger all around us, even when it's not really there. And so that's like why we really think about trauma work as like story work. And why like storytelling is like at the crux of what the Rebound app is trying to support people in doing. Because we really feel like we still like gently like update the story that we're telling ourselves.
Yes.
And this isn't by like arguing with our experience or it's not like a forceful thing, but just by helping like our nervous system like relearn how to feel safe and make new meaning from like what we've been through. And so, we can get into sort of how that looks in the app, like when the time is right. But I think one thing that's been really incredible working with Raeva is like, sort of expanding like all the ways we think about like, what does this fearful narrative look like? And I think a lot of this is what you've like mentioned connecting with in our social media and stuff too. And just like the way that like, as survivors, we experience this may not look like the way that, your doctor, your therapist is talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's so perfect. Honestly, the way that I would have described it at any point during when I had like active trauma or was in survival mode or in recovery, I would have said, I'm not afraid of anything. Like I would have said, I'm not afraid of anything, right? Exactly.
Yes.
I would have said, I faced down like 100 dragons, like you can't, like it's not fear. How could you possibly say that? Because there was this real, and then I think finally when I met Erin, even after I had recovered, she helped me understand that there was actually different layers to it. Like Erin mentioned, there was this conscious mind that I have where I can say things like, I'm not afraid of anything and really believe that. But there's the deeper level on which like being in survival mode hits you, right? In which trauma kind of lives. And so it's that bodily response of how is my body responding to stimuli? And the fact is that whenever I got triggered, I was incredibly upset, right? I was hyper vigilant. My body was constantly on the lookout for danger. And even though I, Raeva, wasn't registering that as fear or never would have called it fear because I would have said, how could you possibly describe me as someone who's fearful? My body was existing in a state of survival that is rooted in this profound way in fear in a way that maybe my mind didn't register. And so it's super fascinating because when we say fear, I think I used to have this very one-dimensional view of what that is. Like, oh, I don't want to jump off that cliff. And that was what fear was to me. But really, I think when we talk about trauma, we're talking about this much, much deeper level, these visceral body responses, even something like numbness, right, is rooted in that same way in fear, which I think is so fascinating. And I never would have realized that.
Right.
I think incredibly fascinating.
So I got to get into the nerdy part of it for just a minute, Erin, and because I just really learned about this. So, and this is actually why I'm going after fear first, because I just found out about the different neuropeptides that flood your body when you have these different emotions, and how fear has a certain, they are almost like different puzzle pieces. Am I getting this right, Erin?
Oh,
and so you experience, like, when you feel a fear response, then neuropeptides of fear flood my whole body. But there's also the same, like, there's different puzzle pieces for gratitude and for love and different things like that. And so I've been like, oh, feeling fear, feeling the physical effects of fear, like letting my body go, oh, I'm afraid right now. Because like you said, I thought fear looked a certain way, just like I thought anger looked a certain way. I thought anger was yelling and throwing things because that's what happened in my family. Well, anger can also be stepping outside and taking your 10, like anger can look a lot of different ways. And I'm learning that. And so now I'm trying to like roll all the way back, like, body, don't flood your neural pathways with fear neuropeptides right now, because this is just toothpaste, like on a bathroom sink. Like, body, you're safe. Something like just constantly reminding my body that I'm safe, because I've lived through so many different things. And so I don't know. I just love that kind of nerdy science part about,
oh, for sure.
choosing.
It's like, it's really like there's a lot happening when we feel afraid. There's a lot happening. I'm sure a lot of which we don't understand yet. But like, I think one thing that most people can relate to is that idea of like when your fear response like physiologically kicks in. So your sympathetic nervous system's taking over everything. Your amygdala is like in control. What becomes impossible is making like thoughtful, complex decisions, or like trying to follow along with what somebody is saying, or think like, what do I need to do today? Because your body is like in that really primal, like kind of fight, flight, freeze sort of place. And so when we're having those kinds of like survival reactions, like day in and day out, our ability to do those like very like adaptive, normal, healthy, like just regular things is really put on hold. And so for people who feel like they can't do things like visualize the future for themselves, like it's no wonder, like you're spending like all day like having to survive in the moment, and then like the more advanced part of your brain is like getting like kind of kicked to the back seat. So yeah, we really think a lot about like how can we get our bodies and our brains out of survival mode, out of that perpetual survival mode state, to make space for something different, something new, something more like what we, would identify as like value in our life.
Yeah.
I think it's so fascinating. Like, I remember when I was in survival mode, I did all sorts of like physically daring things. Like I was a big roller coaster girl. If you wanted me to jump off a cliff, I would have a great time. I just like, I did a lot of things. And then after I got out of survival mode, I realized I just didn't want to do that anymore. And so I kind of conflated this like almost physiological numbness with a lack of fear, when now it's kind of interesting. We're like, I don't want to do that anymore because my life is too precious to me. Don't want to, like, I just like, I feel things more deeply. And so it's just so interesting the way that fear can manifest in a way that you don't realize, or just like on a surface level, the way that we define it is so different than maybe our bodily reality.
It's so true. And every time you say when I got out of survival mode, I'm like, how, when do you get out? Because I want out. I think we've already kind of talked about those hidden narratives. How do we get people out of these background modes that are just running in our life that we learned either in utero or in our community of origin or in our church or whatever? We learn a lot of bypassing and self-erasure and fitting inside of people's boxes and all of that.
Raeva and I are always talking about and thinking about like recovery not being a linear process, and also being something that has a lot of layers to it. So there's a lot of complexity. And so we may, and we don't always like neatly kind of go down one layer at a time. Like we may weave in and out of, different parts of our journey as we go through life. There might be things that come up where we're like, man, I really thought I was past that. And it turns out I'm not. Like in this context, I'm really not. But I think about like the power of different, like thinking of different experiences in our day-to-day life as giving us like clues to some of those like deeper stories that we need to unlock and process. I think a lot of the really like core identity stuff, like you're sort of referencing, it's really hard to go there first because it just looks like these are facts. It doesn't look like this is something to question when you're like actively like earlier in recovery or just like actively in survival mode. It just is really hard to like challenge some of that real deep stuff. But we think about stories like, noticing things in the day to day that really stick with you. I think in our community that Raeva's created on online and these different social media spaces, we hear like a ton of stories about like how are people experiencing this survival mode day to day. So like I always think about like these little instances and like our present day, like those really give us clues as to like what might our bodies be hanging on to from the past. Most of us really know, I think, if we're like honest with ourselves, we kind of know the things that we need to like tap into from the past. It's usually not a mystery, but I think those clues from the present can really like reinforce like why might we need to look back at some of our past stories. And then I think once we do that work of, telling our trauma stories gradually over time in a safe space, as we're ready in our own control, then we start to think about maybe like, if we think about storytelling metaphor or process, like, there's like the telling like the chapter by chapter of our stories. But then what we might do is start thinking about some of like the hidden themes and meanings and metaphor or whatever in the arc of our story. And I think that's some of that really deep self-focused work of like, what are the things I've been telling myself about like who I am and my place in the world or in my relationships. And I think once we kind of get out of that, fight flight on the daily, we can really start thinking more deeply about who we are now in the future. Some of that more like kind of self-worth, self-concept kind of stuff.
It's so interesting because being in survival mode is such a visceral experience. It's all consuming. It takes everything that we have. And I think a lot of us can appear like we're really, really ridiculously high functioning even while we're going through that, right? Like we can be raising kids, we can be making dinner, we can be getting out of bed every morning at 6, like we could be getting, promoted at work and all of these different aspects. And it just it takes us so much just to do the basics that anything beyond that, I think is just, even getting out of bed in the morning, I think is almost superhuman in a state like that. And I think it's absolutely wild how many of us are there. And how hard that we have to work to do things like focus, to do things like get through the day. And so I think it's Yeah, I think it's all quite incredible. And I think we often put a lot of pressure on ourselves to hit certain societal milestones, to like meet certain expectations that we feel as normal, that
Right.
feel are honestly very arbitrarily defined by society. So we can feel like we're behind when if in fact we've been arguably ahead a long time. And so I think one theory that I have that I feel like is evidenced by people like you and you know, as survivors do start to recover, we're kind of racing out of the gates. Like we've got this really deep-seated mission to help other people. We tend to have a really three-dimensional view on the world. We tend to be some of the most fascinating people in the room because we've really lived our lives, and we come in like once you take the survival mode off of it, we're already running a million miles an hour. We tend to live really, really, really fulfilling lives. And
Yeah.
so I think it's all really fascinating. And so I think the pressure to think about the future is just such a classic society pressure that I think is very, very burdensome on trauma survivors who are actively, like, our bodies are actively trying to survive every day. The future starts to figure itself out, right? Like, I feel like a lot of us, especially as we start to recover, we kind of regroup and we say, okay, so which people do we love? Who do we want to spend our time with? How do we want to spend our time, right? And so many of us just like kind of return to our core purposes.
Yes.
Right? Like we return to other people, we return to ourselves. We say, okay, so what do I want from this life? Knowing that it's precious, knowing that it's mine. And then the future starts to kind of piece itself together in ways that certainly like I didn't expect. And now I think talking to hundreds of survivors at this point, right? It's really cool. The level of impact we make on the world almost without even planning for it or trying.
Yeah, it feels effortless when you're moving forward in like a place of love, self-acceptance, mutual flourishing and kindness, like just leading from that place. Things feel so much easier. I mean, we still get, opposition, but the core of like your everyday feels just so much smoother and more rhythmic when you're operating out of love. And instead of like, oh, how can I put these barriers up to keep me safe? You're like, hey, how can I share some of the hydration that I have? Like, how can my big, like Monstera leaves water these little guys down on the moss down underneath it, or whatever. It's like, everybody do your part. I don't know. I'm always like, just get it together. I'm like everybody's grandma now. Like, I don't know. Sorry. Oh, it's so good. Because it's like, so we're talking about like, there's fear it's not just physical. It's not just emotional. It's contagious as all get out. Like fear, I feel like fear is more, and it makes sense, right? That something fearful would be more contagious. Like people would get a bigger reaction out of I think about the media and some of the hate, some of the rage bait that people are posting to get people angry, to get people afraid, is because it's real easy to rally people around a war cry of fear, because self-protection is so big. It's so much a part of who we are. That's why we are still here, and like thriving. And so it's like, wow, I just want people to have a better relationship with fear, like
Yeah.
let's stop using it as a tactic for teaching in our homes, in our classrooms, in our government. Let's stop using fear as a tactic of teaching and start recognizing how much damage it does when it just gets lit like a wildfire. It just lights like a wildfire. It's not okay. You get one kid who's afraid in a classroom, and the entire classroom will shift immediately. Like, if they're truly afraid, a spider or anything else, and how quickly a classroom gets disrupted by something, well, either funny or fearful, right? So
Yeah.
laughter is the same. Laughter's the same, right? Laughter
Yeah.
has that same, if you hear somebody with a really infectious laugh, you can't help but laugh, right?
I think that's so brilliant, Barbie. And I also think that powerlessness is another thing that I feel like is also incredibly ties really well with fear and is incredibly contagious as well, especially for survivors, right? Like the reason the reason that so many of us end up having like symptoms, end up being in survival mode, right, is that we've had that agency stripped away from us, particularly by other people.
Yep.
And so I think that feeling of powerlessness can, like, we get pulled away and we get kind of, I think that's another really, really interesting piece here.
Yeah.
Where what we try to do a lot of, or like what we feel, I think Erin articulates this especially well, but we have this really deep-seated mission of trying to make us as individuals feel less alone. Because like as to combat that sense of powerlessness, because I think like we really do have power as a collective. And
Yes.
to your point that you made at the top of the session, right? Things don't always have to be done the way that they've been done. But the only way that we're able to actually affect change is if we feel like we have senses of agency, both in our life and more broadly. And I think the way that we can do that is oftentimes together.
I think one of the coolest things too, I mean, I've been in the trauma space for a long time and I've spoken to so many people from so many backgrounds. And I think more than any other sort of community of people, I feel like survivors are like motivated, not by their own healing alone. I mean, that's obviously like none of us wants to be like suffering, but so many people are on this journey to like sort of like reclaim their story and find their voice so that they can do like honestly like exactly what you're doing, Barbie, which is like using your voice and using your story to help other people. Like there's very much this like mentality of pulling one another up as we go through our own healing, that is really incredible to like get to be a part of. So yeah, I think a lot of people are really, really sick of having to stay quiet and having to sort of keep their story in the shadows. And I think we all know like the only people who really benefit from that are the people perpetrating these things against our community. So anytime someone is doing what you're doing and like shining light on this experience and what recovery looks like, and it doesn't have to be neat and tidy and clean, but yeah, it's a huge service to everyone.
Yeah, I think Erin once said that a lot of survivors have a visceral need to not be quiet because we've been made to be quiet for so long. And I just felt that it has one of those phrases that has stuck with me so profoundly, because I really, really felt that. I think we heal in community. I think we recover in community, and I think we make change in community.
That's so good. And it's funny. My husband and I have this love-hate relationship with my favorite hashtag, carry on comrade. Because it's like, I just have friends who are in the thick of raising kids from hard places. And we're like literally boots in the ground, like in the trenches, trying to heal our own trauma. We all had to walk through COVID together. Like all of us did, we all have trauma from 2020. And some of us had a whole crap ton of grief, like, and trauma that we were carrying into that. And so some of us were maybe a little further on the grief journey than others might be. But I do love that a lot of us are unpacking grief, like as a whole. I feel like globally, that's the one benefit. If there has to be a benefit, which I don't know. I think all suffering has to bring at least some growth somewhere, hopefully. But, we're all walking through this. It's like it was a great leveling place in the sense of all of us were experienced grief on a massive level, at least in one area of our life, whether it was a person we lost, a job. I have friends who lost their business. We have restaurants that had been open for 50 years and closed. There was a lot of loss economically. I think what's really cool is those of us who are taking the things that we learned, the patterns that we learned, the triggers, the responses, all of the things that our body gave us genetically, wired me to be the kind of resilient human that I ended up being for one reason or another. Who knows why, but it's fine. We're here. But those of us that are here and doing this work, it's like, I don't feel like if we can't not help others up. You can't not see the mom who's raising the same kind of kids, walking through the same stores, putting the same things back because she can't afford them either. Do you know what I mean? It's just rough. A lot of people are going through some hard stuff. And when we take a minute to look at our actual fear, like the stuff that's playing in the background for us, that's moving us away from true love and connection and community, because that's what we're built for. You just have to, you can't not have your whole lens reframed. And I feel like, anyway, I mean, we can either harden and become meaner, right? Or more, go towards that fear, like let the fear win. And then that's where hate comes. That's where prejudice comes, that because I have to preserve myself. This, there's a self-erasure or self-preservation in situations sometimes, but some of us, we're done erasing. So that's why we're having these kind of conversations and building apps and writing really cool, nerdy journals.
I think that's so incredible, and it's so fascinating. And like, I think, at least for me, I think when I recovered, or when I was going through the recovery journey, there was like a real sense of almost ego death that I felt like I had to go through, where I felt like, it just kind of chipped at my self-identity a little bit, where I thought, I'm someone who's not afraid of anything. I get to exert control over my life and my world, right? Like, I have agency. And there's this real squaring that I had to do of, yes, I have a lot of control over who I am and what I do, but also I live in this larger world. And that comes with the pros and cons. It can come with, experiencing trauma that I never planned to have, or, didn't have control over, right? Which also kind of diminishes the shame, right? Because if you believe that you're in control of your situation, you go through trauma, there's always going to be self-blame that happens. So it was like realizing that I wasn't to blame for what happened. I do live in this larger world, but also I get to decide who I am in it. And so it was a really, really interesting journey of, to your point, this almost softening that happened, which I feel like is very, very common for a lot of trauma survivors, of who am I in this larger world? How do I want to live in it? What role do I want to serve? And then what does that mean that I believe about both myself and the people around me? And so it's quite interesting. I think, like, a lot of times I feel like, Erin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we see a lot of folks kind of go through a period of rage. And then that rage kind of really almost dovetails nicely with this mission to make the world better in a way that is really, really three-dimensional and nuanced.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, I think, like, as people, especially in this like storytelling process, as people are like kind of telling their stories that really need to be told in their safe, private space. I don't mean necessarily like on a podcast or anything or in the open, but like,
right.
Sort of like for yourself, like going through your story. Definitely there seems to be this like emotional arc that happens where it's like, the shame and the fear and the, kind of those initial survival reactions kind of give way a little bit to some anger, like anger, like not so much at myself, but like at the world that allowed this to happen or the people who did this to me. And it's like a very adaptive, like very healthy thing to be able to access that anger about what happened to me so that I can then, maybe it's like a step on the way to like seeing your self-worth or seeing that you weren't to blame or like some of those other things. So I absolutely, it's not like a required step, but I think something a lot of people would relate to is this idea of like, when the anger starts to come out, like that's a great sign of some progress.
That's actually such a brilliant way to put it, because I think for me, especially when I started feeling that anger is not something that I had ever really felt before. I feel angry very, very rarely. Like, that's just not my go-to emotion. And so I almost felt like I was accessing anger kind of for the first time. And it really felt like this almost antidote to fear or powerlessness that I had felt. I did not realize that I had that inside me, like this ability to kind of protect and defend myself. And it was so exciting to see that, of like, oh, wow, like it's just almost like this tiger that is going to be on my side. And so I think when looking at the way that you framed this discussion, Barbie, I felt like for me, certainly being able to access anger in this really validating, productive, self-protective way felt like an antidote to that fear and powerlessness that I had felt.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like anger is just a sign. When I have anger, that just means some boundary has been violated in one way or another, something to my survival, my family, whatever. There's something that's like, oh, you just crossed a boundary. And so many of us, like even me as a child framing anger in the way of, the drunk stepfather with the beer bottle throwing it against the wall, or, whatever, the police having to come and break up every fight, or however that's what I thought anger looked like. But anger could also be, for me, it was playing out in not eating, like not feeding myself. I was showing my anger by putting it someplace else, like, because my body was trying to feel anger, right? It's just, I wasn't letting it, right? And so what I love is that, like, well, the Inside Out movies have really changed a lot for a lot of people. And I just love that Disney did this, because we all have this really neat character that we can now realize, okay, these guys always live in your body. You're born with these emotions. These are normal. You're going to feel anger. You're going to feel disgust. You're going to feel, all of these things. And Disney doing something like what they did and putting graduate level psychology into such a simple concept that so many could understand, it really did help unlock some things for me. The first time I watched it, I sobbed through that movie. I was so boxed up. Like, there's no way I was going to unpack. There's no way. Like, if I felt mad, I was going to unleash. I felt like if I allowed fear or anger to fully express itself in me, there were terrible things that I was probably capable of, at that point, right? I felt that, like, if you let me feel rage or anger, I'm going to tear somebody up. It was really neat to be able to, now all these years later, having people have these little simple tools, and like, then they follow it up with the anxiety piece. I'm like, my kids have just the best tools, like, they know what anxiety can look like and feel like. And like, it feels really silly to me as a 56-year-old female to be saying I'm learning basic psychology level stuff. Like, I was 54 years old when I found out that my body wasn't the problem. That my bras were not comfortable for me. And my therapist told me at 54, well, your body isn't the problem. You know that, right? And I'm like, no. I've just always tried the same thing. And her saying that one thing to me, that one thing led me on wait a minute, is there something other than this design? Because this is what people told me I had to wear my whole life. It was the design of that garment on my body that was the problem. And so I had to go on this self-discovery, so she opened a door of possibility to me that had not existed yet. And so this is the kind of stuff that I'm hoping to bring forward. It's like, well, when we have a conversation about, like, okay, if you've ever actually been stalked in your life and somebody happens to leave the blinds open at night, yeah, you're going to have a visceral reaction to that. Yeah, you're not going to like that people can see in. Okay, heal through it. Be kind while you do. Stop, because like I do, I get kind of pissy sometimes at people who forget, like, that I don't like the windows open at night. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm bringing my own crap into their narrative, and I don't want that anymore, right? I just don't want to carry stuff inadvertently into their life without dealing with it first. Like, if it's my trash, I'll pick it up. I want to take care of it, If it's my mom's trash, I'll pick it up too. That's what I'm doing, like, healing through all this, and it's crazy making, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think, like, to your point too, though, it's like these reactions, these emotions, like the anger, these are not like kind of inherently like good or bad things. Like, they just are. And I think part of our, like, each of our journey, trauma survivor or not, but I think that the load is a lot higher for survivors. We just have to figure out, like, what pieces of this am I going to hold on to, or how am I going to express it? Like, how am I going to manage it? Not like, we're not going to, like, erase any of those experiences or those feelings. It's just maybe making room for, like, the nuance a little bit.
I had just never heard my own motivations for recovering from trauma phrased better. I just, like, could not, the wanting to not bring my own stuff into someone else's narrative, particularly someone that I loved.
Yeah.
I've never heard it phrased like that. And I just, like, that's another one that I'm going to hang on to. It really meant a lot to hear that phrased that way, because I've just never heard my own motivations, like, articulated that clearly. So I'm super grateful. I also had a question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, please, ask away.
Yeah, you had mentioned making sure that, or working really hard to make sure that fear does not govern your household.
Yeah.
And I'm super curious about the ways or the strategies that you kind of use to make that not happen, because that's not an easy thing, I think, for a lot of trauma survivors.
I don't have a real clear answer for that, except that I'm super verbal about what I'm witnessing right now. And so roll back a tiny bit. We've got kids that just need a lot of help self-regulating. And so we had to do a bunch of like special type of parenting classes to teach them how to practice things like patience with their hands or anger, just different things. And so one of the tools I picked up early on was to out loud talk about, oh, this jar isn't opening, I'm frustrated. And out loud feeling all of the things so that this little one who was having a really hard time verbalizing his needs and his feelings would sort of pick up on some of these cues. And so I've sort of taken that model, unfortunately for my husband, because it feels like probably very passive aggressive at times, I'm going to guess, because I'm just like, screw this. I can't keep doing the same thing. I can't keep having these same conversations. I can't keep watching authoritarian style parenting into this because that's fear-based. I can't let them make their decisions. I won't let them make their decisions based on fear unless their life is actually in danger or they're actually going to lose something that means a lot to them, or they're going on a stage and they're terrified because they should be standing in front of 100 of their peers. Like let's put fear in its proper place. Let's let it have its voice. So that's how I'm doing it right now. I'm sort of just narrating it as I see it and hoping to find it in me as I'm also trying to help others witness it in their own self, right? Because I've got a couple of little ones but I would love to teach them to come out of survival mode now. Like I've got a little one who's so hyper vigilant. He's 11 and there's like so much hyper vigilance and that's all survival mode. So I'm just sort of intuitively applying like real time acceptance and commitment therapy, I guess. Like, hey, I see you're mad right now, husband. And that's a feeling you should this is an okay feeling to have it. But let's reframe it so that it's not putting something that doesn't need to be on the kids or on me or whatever, so it's ugly. It's really been ugly. But it's also beautiful. Like, if you've ever done some really good, hard gardening or plant work or anything that requires like taking off anything that grew in when you didn't want it to, stuff that came with the soil, all of that, like, dude, sometimes you got to clean up stuff and it's hard, brutal work. The purpose of it is so much better. I have little ones who are recognizing their own body cues. Like I celebrate when somebody says, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, thanks for listening to your body. Because I had to turn my body off for so long. My stomach doesn't growl, or it does sometimes. It didn't for decades because I didn't ever do anything to honor it. I didn't listen to a single signal it was giving me. So it shut them all off. And now I have more things than my body needs to be dealing with because I wasn't in a supported home that said, hey, you look afraid right now, sweetie. How can I help you? Or I'm noticing this about your body right now. Your pupils are getting small. I'm sensing you're afraid of something. Let's talk through this. I'm here. So does that answer your question?
This is so incredible. No, I think this is I think this is everything, right? I think this is the work of a multiple generations, right? This is the stuff I think that matters so, so, so greatly, right? Like this is the reality of cycle breaking, in that it both is incredibly fulfilling, arguably more than any other work ever, right? But also incredibly messy, incredibly difficult, and just like a day-to-day process. I think one thing we certainly hear a lot is as a big combat to some of these things is just accountability and teaching accountability, which is just so cool, right? Because everyone always messes up. But having kids know that they deserve apologies from adults when they're wronged, or
Yes.
the ability to say it's not what happens, it's how you repair, is such a foundational piece of that cycle breaking. So I think all of this is so incredible and so in awe of the work that you're doing and your ability to articulate it in a way that is both actionable and helpful to others.
Oh, that's funny. I felt like I didn't articulate well at all.
Totally disagree. Like, I'm like, okay, yeah. So you're like teaching your kids to like label and understand their feelings and to like know that these are like normal responses and like put them in the forefront of their minds so they can um like learn to like do it for themselves later on and like make choices related to like that's incredible. It's like so much work, but like yeah, like not I mean I'm sure it's the rare person from like prior generations who got that. It's so cool that like anytime we can like give our own kids like the thing that we didn't get that we wish we had gotten, such a gift.
Well, and even our current selves, right? Like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
partnering with someone, my husband and I are co-parenting, and then we're also parallel parenting with my daughter, who's their
Yeah.
birth parent. And, when you're doing this kind of work, there's so much that gets stirred up. There's so much that's generational. There's so much I should have, or, all this stuff, or I wish they had, like I wish my mom was probably doing the very best. I like to assume that about most people, unless they show us that they're a psychopath and they don't have any kindness in their bodies. I really want to know though, what kind of strategies can we do in the moment when we realize, oh, wait, I'm upset about this. I'm going to the store and I'm mad all of a sudden. Well, it's not because I'm trying to figure out which toothpaste I want to buy. It's because I'm afraid I'm not going to have enough money to buy it. Right. So this is where I'm doing this real-time analyzing on the regular right now. So I go, I'm like literally doing all this stuff in real time. I'm at the checkout stand. I'm like, what's really going on under the surface? Is it just enough to address the fear and feel it and then accept what comes next? I mean, like, what do we do? When we feel fear and we identify our body is feeling afraid, where do we go next? Which one of you wants to take it?
Oh, it's got to be the psychologist, Barbie.
Oh,
it's definitely the psychologist.
I don't, I was going to say, well, obviously, Raeva, like.
I know the one who did it, right?
Oh my God. I mean, I can tell you what I'm a big, my grandmother taught me how to do yoga when I was 4.
Okay.
I'm Indian, so, it's, and so my biggest thing, if I've got 15, 20, 30 minutes is I try to do yoga nidra whenever I can. I find it really, really great. If you've never tried it, it's super worth it. It's a guided relaxation that just gets incredibly deep.
I have to interrupt. Chester, if you ever hear this episode, yes, I thought about it. Raeva might be saying the word that 3 years ago, she said you need to do this kind of yoga. 4 years ago. I think it was this one. Is this the one where you lay on the ground and your whole purpose is to become as still and heavy and grounded as possible?
It is the greatest thing.
Okay.
I've been doing it since I was a little kid, and it is, I don't know how people exist in the world without it. It's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, but what if you always hold your breath? Like I don't know if, like I started working with a trauma therapist in 2007 and realized back then that I held my breath for literally everything. I hold my breath for mascara, for brushing my teeth, for everything. I started working on it that many years ago. And I still hold my breath. I'm fine now with like my mascara. Sometimes I can make myself breathe through that kind of stuff. But like, how do you there are some people in this world walking around like me, never diaphragmatically breathing. Like it feels terrifying to get sometimes into that space. And so, I would just love any help in the breathwork area. It's so hard. Some of us.
100%. And I feel that very viscerally. Like, I feel like I'm a very like bouncy person. And also just like the time I was in survival mode, right? I don't know if I ever really took a breath.
Yeah.
I think whenever I was in survival mode and someone told me just take 3 deep breaths, it almost felt, I know it's very effective and I'm a big believer in breath work, but in the moment it felt too trivial, or it almost just felt like they weren't getting the magnitude. And so what I'm a real big sucker for is things that give you very, very clear instructions, especially when I'm feeling overcharged. And so what I really like about Yoga Nidra is that what you are doing is you are systematically, it's just a series of instructions.
Okay.
You are step by step bringing your awareness to each different part of your body, like your left big toe and then like your left second toe. And so it's just, it's not even about relaxing it. It's just about bringing your awareness there, and the relaxation happens automatically. You don't have to try. It's kind of like a big, a big motto that we have about Rebound, or what we want to make things, is that you don't have to force things.
Yes.
And so that's our whole ethos and the way that we design the app. And I think it's very much the same in Yoga Nidra. It's not about forcing things. You just follow the instructions, because when you're overloaded, you don't have the time, or you don't have the brain space to be able to kind of put yourself through something. It's much better to just go through that step-by-step process, at least for me. And
Okay.
so,
Well, I think there's also this like paradox that happens where if you're trying to force the change, force the relaxation, force the release, whatever it is, like the opposite will happen. You'll be holding it tighter. And then I think if you let go of that need to force it, if you let go of just like kind of like engage the process, just that noticing, or just that allowing things to unfold as they will, like kind of similarly, the release will happen, the relaxation will happen. It'll be more likely to happen on its own. And like the more you practice, the easier it gets. So I think forcing is often not the way.
It's usually my way, though. It's like right through. I'm going to force my way into this. Like even, how I'm handling in the moment conflict sometimes in my home. I'm like, oh, that wasn't a great response there, husband. Could we please roll that back a little bit, or whatever. I'm constantly repairing and I'm constantly figuring it out. But I am my mom used to call me a bull in a china shop sometimes, with my tag. Just like, dude, this just feels lame. It just feels like a waste of everybody's time. And I don't mean to be unkind, but it's like I've tried kindness for a really long time. Anyway, no, that's awesome.
I feel that really profoundly. I'm the same way. I'm always like, oh, like I have a real bias to action. And so I think it's a tough thing. I mean, honestly, what the other thing that I do a lot is kind of use what we built at Rebound to essentially start to do this as well, as in the moment. Because again, like I need to take action, especially if I'm feeling a little overcharged. I need to take action. I need to be doing something.
Yeah.
And so honestly, we've kind of introduced something called present day storytelling that I've started to use a lot, where essentially you, without judgment, tell the story of what happened, and it actually starts to manufacture, like the release happens on its own, like Erin said. And so I think for me, it's always that 1-2 punch of, I need instructions. I need to be doing something, especially when I'm past my window of tolerance.
Right.
And then I also need it to be something that isn't forcing change. Because if I try to force change, again, like Erin said, I'm just going to get deeper in the hole. And so it's really like when I have a little bit longer of a time, it's maybe something like Yoga Nidra, which really lets me get really deep. And then kind of for these shorter bursts of like, what can I do on my own in a 10-minute window? These present day storytelling moments really are able to access and release what my body's been carrying.
Could one of you talk about how you walk us through the story? We don't start in the beginning, right? Where do we start?
Yeah, we're entering through this portal of sorts of this like present day storytelling, just to I think one of the things we've learned over time by, everything we do, I'll just start by saying like everything we do, everything you see in the app has been vetted by like so many of our members, or a number of our members of our community on social. So nothing goes out that hasn't been sort of like tested and given the thumbs up. But one of the things that consistently was coming up for our members was like, when you're getting to the point of telling a trauma story, there are a lot of things going on that make that hard. Like the obvious stuff, like it's really emotional and it's hard. And it's this thing that I've been avoiding doing, but I know I need to do it. Like it feels really heavy and weighty. But there's also like some of it that's just like using my voice, speaking out loud. Like, am I doing it right? Like, is this the way you're supposed to do storytelling? Like, that self-doubt. So, we started implementing something called present day storytelling, which is getting at helping people identify some of the clues in their day to day that might be pointing at underlying stories from the past that need to be unearthed when the time is right. But it also gives people this really active hands-on way to begin learning about and engaging the storytelling process, which for most of us is like a very, very new thing, like finding and using our voice in this way. So that's our current entry point in the app, is helping people identify, and we give very specific prompts. So you're never guessing, like to Raeva's point, like the specificity is key. Like you're never guessing, like, what should I be saying? Is this correct? And then we also are guiding you through understanding, like, what's coming up in your body as you're talking about this. Like, what emotions might you be feeling? Is there anything that you were able to like let go of by telling this story? And so we kind of ease up to the deeper, harder, sort of traumatic stories. And then when we get to that point, like, as you're saying, we start very small. So just giving a little bit at the surface, like, how can you sum up just in a couple minutes? Like, how would you describe what happened at that time? And then each subsequent story is very specifically crafted to guide the member to a different aspect of the story. So, like, let's tap into your sensory memory. Let's tap into, what were you noticing in your body? What was going through your mind, like cognitively? And so over time, as you're grabbing these different pieces of your story, you're creating this very rich and very full narrative. But we're only getting there through these little steps. We're not like jumping in and, jumping into the deep end, like right off the bat. It's sort of wading in at a pace that feels a little bit more okay. So it's not something that everyone may feel ready for right away, but the beauty is, like, you choose, like, it's up to you. You want to do it, you do it. You don't feel like you want to do it, you don't do it. We fully respect people's ability to choose, like, when the time is right.
Totally. I think consent is such a core part of trauma recovery.
Yeah.
And so that's really, I mean, that's part of our entire ethos, that and just making sure that this actually works for real survivors who are actually living this on a day-to-day basis and have incredibly full, complex lives. And it's really, it's been fun to at least personally engage with those little moments of relief and release of like, okay, when we go through things, right, our body carries this in a way that we might not always realize, or it might manifest in so many different little ways. And how can we kind of help our body access that and then release those moments so that they don't kind of stack up? And so it's just really kind of going at a pace that feels consensual to you, that you determine, because as Erin mentioned, healing is never linear. And I think a lot of us feel like we have stuff that we need to release, right? Or the path to healing is through that accessing and releasing and not forcing change, but allowing it to take place on that deeper level. And so that's really the whole ethos of all of it.
I love that. I had never even considered that I needed to give myself consent to share those parts of my story. You hear, oh, you'll heal if you talk about it. You'll heal if you, whatever. There's a lot of different ways to find our healing and our repair. And some of the scars we're going to carry with us in different ways. Some, can't, sometimes you get an injury or a trauma and, somebody has to reset a bone, or in my case, you put screws in and all of that. And that's like, that helps the initial injury. Sure. You've got that broken vertebra fixed. And then you got to tend to the scar tissue. You've got to tend to the ligaments. You've got to make sure that the muscles get full range of motion back. You've got to make sure that nerve supply is maintained. There's so many different ways to heal. There's so much work, and the work that I'm finally getting into. And I think that like your app is helping people is we get to now, okay, 20 years ago, this thing happened. I'm able to talk about it. And I know that the way I'm going to be modeling my healing and incorporating that into my story, I guess, and in who I am now, and like watching for the pitfalls or whatever, the things that I learned in that season without judgment, without, anything other than just true love for my own self, needing it to be spoken if it needs to be spoken. If it doesn't need to be spoken, it just needs to be addressed and find, or acknowledged in my own head. It's helpful, just like me realizing, okay, I'm holding my breath. That took somebody helping me realize that I was holding my breath. Now from then forward, I'm taking that understanding and trying to incorporate this into my life and letting myself move into this healing however it looks. And it's, I don't know, taking my hands off of what I think healing might look like, or what a person who is recovered from trauma might move through the world. Well, I could probably take away all of my prejudice against what I think that should look like and just live it, right?
That's so well put. I think that's incredible.
I have taken so much of your time, and you guys have to be back. You just, anytime, the next one we're going to go after is shame. So I can't wait. We're going to unbox some shame. And
that's a good topic. That's a big one.
It's such a big one. Oh, please, Erin, because this is something I'm just learning about, right? Is how modeling nervous system regulation after something really terrifying. People are saying, go shake it out or something. How long do we need to do this for? Do you have, and like, what do we just need to literally go shake it off? Like, what is it? Is this Taylor? Like, so,
this might be like, I do have like, sort of an undercover, like defiant streak in me. So this is probably like kind of on brand for me, but like, I'm really opposed to there being one way that we all have to react or process something.
I love that.
And if you tell me there's one way, I will be very motivated to tell you, no, there's not. And I will do everything I can to come up with more ways. So I guess all that to say, like, to me, like a big part of this is doing like kind of what you were describing with your kids. Like always, to me, it always starts with understanding and like labeling. And so, let me learn about like, what is my reaction to these like acute kind of stressful or like fearful experiences, like noticing that and just like being present without judgment. And then, I'm also a nerd. So like, I'm a big fan of like experimentation and trial and error. So like, you can tell me like shaking is helpful, or you can tell me doing yoga is helpful, but like, I'll figure out what's helpful for me. So I think some of that too is like, maybe learning like, okay, if it doesn't work for me, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It's just like not my thing I need in that time. So each of us kind of, if you don't love breathing, maybe there's some other like somatic exercise that you find soothing, like having that awareness, being willing to try different things. And if you find something that is helpful, like kind of holding on to it. We all have our things that we like and don't like. Some people love breathing, some people hate it, whatever is your thing.
I
love
having
that. Your ability, but you have to be willing to like participate and observe and like understand to be able to get to that point.
Barbie, thank you so much for having us. This was such a pleasure. We could not be possibly more grateful. It just has meant a lot.
Thank you so much for your time. And please give me your socials again, just so they're here, so that if anybody doesn't have time to check the show notes, where can we find you?
We're on TikTok at Rebound Health, and we're on Threads at Try Rebound. The app is available on iOS in the United States. We're working on expanding.
Great.
And if you download the app, you can get a 7-day free trial so you can figure out if it's for you or not.
Yeah. But everybody, I'm not even kidding you. You really need to follow them on socials, because you are going to hear conversations or see conversations happening in real time that are going to be addressing so many of the things that you're actually experiencing. And you sometimes don't even realize that you needed to see the words in black and white and the responses of the people that it is resonating with and who are on a similar healing journey. Anybody who's had a lot of trauma, if you hear one thing, there's no one clear, like direct path to heal through trauma, but there is one thing that you can't keep doing, and it's the thing that's keeping you where you're at. Like, if we're not doing any healing, let's create space, even if it's just resting, with the intent of restoring your body from a hard season or whatever. Like, make sure that we're actively thinking about our healing, because the more we think about our healing, the more we heal, the more we grow. All right, you guys,
so much.
I will say I love you, because life is short. I love you guys so much. I love your team, and I love what you guys do. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Till next time.
Bye, Barbie.
Bye. Okay, I have all my notes handy so that I don't misquote here. First of all, Raeva and Erin, as a personal thank you again, I just cannot express how much joy this conversation brought to me. It feels amazing to be alive today, and that is a powerful statement coming out of my mouth. So thank you very much. For my listeners, we can all do well to narrate our stories in a way that brings authenticity and value to our everyday and to the people around us. Even doing something like processing some difficult things during the day under the framing of storytelling in the way that this app makes it possible is beneficial. It helps things to not compound. It helps you to get into the space of hearing yourself narrate things that are going on in your everyday, and you get to then choose what you're going to do with them. So if you can, please, 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 at least do your 7-day free trial or follow them. It's at Rebound Health on TikTok, and they are Try Rebound on Threads and Instagram. My favorite place to hang out with them. I am not kidding you. You will absolutely enjoy hanging out with them on socials. And I want to give a shout out to their website, because it'll take you right to all of the resources that you need, how to get started. It gives you all of the information about the team behind this resource. So I would be remiss if I didn't give this to you. Please, wherever you are, navigate to hellorebound.com and check them out. It has truly been a pleasure to open this box with you. I can't wait to see where we end up next. Thank you for listening to part 1 of this episode. I hope that it provided you some value, a new way to look at things, or even just some support in your day-to-day. I hope you'll join us for part 2. Until next time, my friend,